Hello, and welcome to the second GM prep video in this mini-series. If you don't know, there's a playlist in the description where all of the videos and live streams about the series are all listed chronologically. So the first note is I would like to have some rumors about the Green Matriarch or something like that, because the people would be aware that the Green Matriarch hasn't shown up in a while, and so they would probably still be talking about it. So the next thing is, the Seas ones, which I invented last live stream, I also invented a little bit of description about them, and so I'm just going to write that down here, so that if it ever comes up again, I won't contradict myself. The next thing is, I would like to come up with a boarding house, and perhaps another tavern in Shard's Calling. So for the alternative tavern, I would like to have it contrast the Scaly Shine Tavern, in that the Scaly Shine Tavern is very, not rough, but not very refined. So perhaps further uptown, so further up the hill, maybe a fancier, perhaps a bit more expensive establishment would be good. So I've called it the Discerning Walker's Respite. This is the other tavern. It is a refined tavern further uptown, varnished wood paneling on the walls, maroon carpets, and a few heroes' busts. I'm imagining these as being famous heroes who have supposedly stayed at this tavern on their journeys. If the players want to make a history check or something to see if they maybe know anything about these people, then I can make up a few bits of lore about them on the spot. Do we also need a boarding house? Sure, I can spend a couple minutes coming up with a boarding house. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. The Crash and Snore. So crash as in to just lay down and immediately fall asleep. Is a boarding house at the edge of the city, surrounded by fields and workshops. And then in brackets I've put a dye maker, so someone who makes colors to dye things with, and several charcoal makers. Because a lot of dyes, the smell isn't that great when a lot of dyes that are made like traditionally, where you have lots of herbs or other materials smashed up, ground up, and fermenting or oxidizing or undergoing chemical reactions to produce the dye. And that often lets off gases, which doesn't smell great. And of course, charcoal makers, you get quite a bit of smoke in the air as well. So it's pretty much the opposite of the Discerning Walker's Respite, which is kind of the fun of this place. And the owner/builder of this place, I've called him Old Jaran, who's an elderly human male. So after much deliberation, I've decided that he is from a city called Balveth, from the Kushia Deserts to the far southwest, which is a little bit of an open clue again, so I might pick that up later. It's a nice bit of hinting at world building, which I've of course not really done yet because there's no point in doing it. The players may never turn up here. They may always go back down to the Scaly Shine Tavern, and that might be the place that they always rest at. Although, given the length of this campaign, I don't know how many times they would actually go back here to rest. But it's nice to have. Just maybe if it's even just for them to pass by, to read the sign or something like that. Oh right, yes, what I said last time, the rodent farms for the Scale Guard. Rodent farm on the outskirts of the city, several pig corral-like enclosures full of large furry rodents with no eyes called cave gnawers, which is a bit tricky to say, but that's okay, which are farmed for the Scale Guard and substituted for gold taxes. Now the farmers are Jarson and Kamal Fishcatcher. I know that I've used the name Jarson before as the trade counselor, But I like to sometimes reuse names a few times to kind of make it feel like these are common names that people have here. Like, for example, in the UK, the name James is quite common. I've got a note about a potential second dragon from the tropical island, perhaps a younger dragon who is inquisitive and wants to find out what happened to the Grey Matriarch. Perhaps sensing an opportunity to fill a void. I don't think that we need to do any world building with that yet, because that isn't really relevant to the current part of the plot. I've had an idea of perhaps having a temple or structure that was built by the worshippers of the kind of opponent of Tritherion. However, given the how few sessions we have, I think I might just save that here in case we need another place for the party to go to find an NPC or to get an item or to do whatever. They walk through the wilderness somewhere, and then Brak can feel that his connection with his deity, with Tritherion, kind of waning slightly as they walk through the specific area, and then as they continue, it goes back to normal. Yeah, I might put that in as an open clue. Then later on, if I do decide to use this, there will already be a clue as to where this place might be if they need to find it. And if I don't decide to use it, it's maybe some of the Beholder's magic. Or maybe there's a magic item buried somewhere, or it could be 1,000 things that have caused this. So as the party is walking through the city, as they're passing by the bathhouse, I want one of the councillors exiting the bathhouse, so that if the party later on wants to have a conversation with one of them, or get in touch with one of them, and maybe they don't get through right away because these are unknown people, through bureaucracy they probably wouldn't get directly through to a councillor, I can describe later on how the councillors are clothed, and so that will hopefully then spark the idea that actually, maybe, they've remembered that they've seen one of these councillors at the bathhouse, and so that's a place that they frequent, or at least that one frequents, and so they could maybe wait there for a bit. So I will write that in here. Here we go. Councillor exiting the Wise Pearl Bathhouse, maroon robes, gold trims, and green dragon heads embroidered on shoulders. Now it's just a matter of deciding which councillor I wanted to be. I was thinking either the High Elf or the Succubus, but the Succubus would of course be polymorphed. So as a Succubus, Annabelle can polymorph into a smaller medium humanoid. Normally, she polymorphs, so transforms herself into a young, very innocent-looking woman, maybe in her early 20s or something like that. So I was thinking either her or Hinal, the Councillor of Construction. I think that because I want to build the connection that this may be one of the councillors exiting the bathhouse, I think that the image of a high elf would build that connection stronger. I suppose now might be a good point in time to do a little bit of world building about Vale Rift. I'll just make a quick list of items that I want to have in here. I want there to be a scrying orb, which officially was gifted by Skral Mitan, who's actually just a minion of Zinthar. I'm picturing this like in the center of town. There's this large park with beautiful flowering trees, and in the middle is almost like a fountain, and in the center of the fountain is a little pedestal with this large, like maybe, I don't know, 6 foot wide sphere sitting on it. Because of course Zinthar has this layer underneath the town, and so being able to use this orb, which is right in the center of town, to observe and watch everybody who walks through the town would be something that a beholder would do. Of course, we need taverns, we need places for people to stay. Of course, the first one is Hiker's Release. It has to be, that's the one that the town is named after. After all, we've got to have that. Now, I'm imagining this as a family-run business, so the proprietor is Shane Groomer, I've decided. He's a human male, and His father, who's elderly, is called Maxan Groomer, and so it might be an interesting bit of roleplay there. If this is kind of a touristy thing, the way I'm imagining this is a bit like in like Old Faithful, for example, the geyser. Because if you think about it, Old Faithful is kind of a weird magical effect. I think I need to come up with a list of a few of these wonders that people might have fenced off and are maybe charging a little bit of admission to. In writing down a few of these magical wonders, I've had the idea that since people are making money with this, there would of course be people trying to scam with these wonders. So people making up wonders that don't actually work. So the real ones, I've come up with anti-gravity fields. If you walk into that area, you just float off the air, maybe like 5 feet or something. Then I've got the Stellar Dance Hill, people's perception of the stars maybe being off, so the stars move strangely in the sky as perhaps an illusion effect. Then the Shrieking Pumpkin Patch, just like the idea, a pumpkin patch where if you get close, pumpkins there start shrieking at you, and maybe you've got to make a constitution save or something, else you're going to take a point of non-lethal damage if you get too close or something like that. Okay, then the Bloody Daisy Cottage. I'm just imagining this like a traditional English thatched roof cottage with a garden on the outside, and there's a little patch of daisies there. It looks like they're covered in blood. If you pick one, then instead of the normal sap that's in it, it's a little bit of blood drips out. Then the bat ear sheep, which is again something that I came up with when I first invented this town. So yeah, just sheep that have bat wings for ears. Then bubbling cobblestones, like chewing gum that's been blown up, and eventually it pops, and just this goopy cobblestone in there. Maybe we could even have this be like a profession in this town where there's this one guy, a paver, going around with this kind of scraping stick to kind of pierce and scrape out those goopy cobblestones, and sets in fresh ones. The last thing is a spoiled milk spring. So just a natural spring in a field somewhere, but instead of water coming out, it's spoiled milk. Why spoiled milk and not normal milk? Well, if it were normal milk, then the people of this town would sell it. I mean, they might still sell it because it's a magical thing, but yeah, it would be really useful. But I don't want the town to be changed that much by this one thing, and so I've decided to make it spoiled. Right, and then as for fake magical wonders, I thought maybe Lover's Crag, so if you don't know what a crag is, it's basically a large, well, the size can vary, but a large rocky outcropping or boulder. Anyway, so Lover's Crag, where people sell tickets or something where you can go up there, and if you and your partner go up there, then you'll fall in love and you'll be bound together forever and you will always love each other. With these fake wonders, maybe you could even have amateur wizards or something performing little cantrips or stuff to make it feel magical, as though it's an actual real magical place, even though it actually isn't. And maybe that's a potential location where you could maybe find some of those young wizards or sorcerers or whatever who've come to this island at the behest of Zinthar's minions. That's an interesting thought. Haven't thought about that before. Anyway, so Lover's Crag, then Heaven's Light's Tree, so this big ancient oak or something, where there are strange lights that sometimes move around at night, and seem to have this kind of heavenly aura to them, even though it's just dancing lights. Then Spectre's Crossing Tavern. Now, this could be a good alternative to the actual Hiker's Release, where it's a tavern that is said to be haunted, and they've got this Halloween-y haunted theme, but in reality, it's just ghost sound. Yeah? And then a wishing urn. So maybe in the market or something, there's this pedestal with a large urn where you can throw in money or an item of value or something and make a wish, and then the wish might come true. Or actually, the other option I was thinking was making it a divination urn, which actually, that would work better, because Mr. W's character is a divination wizard, and so if they encounter this, perhaps he can use his arcane knowledge and training to realize quite easily that this is a fake. Okay, so I am going to change this to divination? Divination? Is that how that's spelled? Oh, divination, of course, yeah, sorry. Right, so let's see, what is next? I was thinking that perhaps there could be a witch nearby, a mile or so outside of Vale Rift, who is actually quite friendly, and she makes potions and that sort of thing, which actually, I've thought maybe she exports those to the various magic shops on the island. So if people go into the Dragon Eye and they see those healing potions, maybe there could be a little label which is like brewed lovingly by, and then the witch's name or something like that. And so this is where she lives, perhaps. And the townsfolk might blame the witch. Well, I say blame. It wouldn't really be blame since all these magical effects give prosperity to the town, but maybe see her as the cause of this. And then, of course, recently, as the Beholder's been having nightmares, and these nightmare creatures have been appearing at night, perhaps they have been blaming her for those as well. And so that might be an interesting plot or side quest that the party might be able to go on when they get here and inevitably get attacked by the nightmare creatures themselves. How about if she is this kind witch, she probably wouldn't, I mean, she may, but she probably, the way I'm picturing her, wouldn't really want to use that many bits of animals that she would have to either hunt down and kill herself or buy from somewhere. Like, you know, Eye of Newt, that sort of thing. And so instead, how about she has all of these shelves of flower pots that have mushrooms growing in them, but instead of the normal cap of the mushroom, it's that bit of the animal that's growing out. So imagine that, a flower pot with mushrooms growing out, but instead of the cap, it's eyes of newt. Like actual real eyes connected to the stem. Or perhaps tongues, like tongue of dog, that sort of thing. Imagine if the party get here and the witch isn't home and they decide to break in thinking that she's a villain. Or maybe it's a tower. Maybe a tower would be better, because then Emichu's character, and as an Aarakocra, that could be a thing where his flight skill could come in useful. Like, Car flies up to the top of the tower, enters in, goes down through the bottom to open up the door for the other party members, maybe. And imagine going in there without thinking that she's a villain, and finding all of this stuff growing there. That, I think, seems quite atmospheric and quite good. I'm going to put in a title for it, but I'm not going to actually world build any more of it, because as the party... So I've got the idea of it, and if the party go in that direction, then great. But if the party go in a different direction, then I don't want to waste the world building time and energy on this. Now, we'll come up with a name, because, like I said, with the Dragon Eye, with those potions, I want to be able to give the players a name, which is, again, an open clue. So, well, I say open clue. It's kind of a semi-open clue because I know where it will link to if the players do follow it up on, but it doesn't have to link somewhere. How about the name Mirgrath MacClaw? It sounds like the name of a villain. And so if the people here in the town, if the players here in the town from the people, that, old MacClaw's been up to her tricks again, and when will the government do something about Mirgrath in the tower or something like that, Mirgrath in the tower, then, yeah, I mean, that is clearly a villain, of course. Of course she isn't, but the party won't know. They might figure it out. They might see the twist coming. But here's the thing to remember: if you're GM, if the party sees the twist coming, and then that's the twist, as long as it isn't something too obviously simple, that's rewarding. Even though it might feel like for you as though the party's just ruined your fun. No. The plot's there for the party, and so if the party manages to anticipate it, then that's great. So if they see the twist coming, good on them. The only two things I've got left here about Veil Rift is, one, the monsters, which I'll still have to think about a little bit, and two, because originally I wanted Veil Rift to just be on the way to Zinthar's actual test of strength. However, what if Zinthar doesn't know that the monsters from his nightmares are caused by his nightmares? Because these monsters are all about uncertainty, about lack of knowledge, about what might be lurking in the dark. And so I think that, because that's what he's been dreaming of, what his nightmares were about the Green Matriarch, what happened to her, yeah? And so I think it would be quite fitting that these monsters that Zinthar doesn't know about the origins of these monsters of uncertainty. And so this could be another part of the test, to see if these new wizards who come here, one, can survive unattacked by these creatures, and two, if any of these magically trained people who've still got fresh creative ideas because they've just come out of their wizard schools or whatever, could maybe figure out what's going on here, because basically they're free minions. If Zinthar doesn't know about the monsters, and this is part of the plan, then Shell Painter would have been tasked with making sure that the party gets an encounter with these monsters. And so perhaps he deliberately directs them to sleep somewhere in the outskirts of Veil Rift for the night. Yes, deliberately in a place that's not safe, which might also give the party a nice hint that Shell Painter has ulterior motives. So I think I am going to go with that. So I'll need to come up with the place where they're going to rest, and also, of course, the actual monsters themselves. However, I do doubt that the party is actually going to spend the night there this session. Maybe we'll get to nightfall, but then we'll pick up there next time. I think that would be ideal, because then we've got enough time to... Because if we think about it, what will have to happen this session is they'll have to meet Sodom Shell Painter, have conversations with him, maybe explore a little bit more of the Radiant City to have a look at magical items or other stuff, then go on the journey, travel there, perhaps find some things on the way, although I may need to abbreviate that, because, like I was talking about in my report video, I do think I'll have to abbreviate some of this, where I normally would have more freedom for exploration and for description and for the players finding their own ways. I do think I'll have to abbreviate and guide a little bit more. But that'll have to happen. And then in Veil Rift, I want the party to get a sense for the town. I want them to be able to have a look at some of these magical wonders, and I want them to be able to speak with some of the NPCs here, and perhaps even do a little bit more shopping if they haven't in the past, which is a thing I might need to come up with, maybe a couple of shops here as well. I think that is, honestly, probably going to be a bit much for a 2-hour session, given that we'll probably start a little bit late because of starting the stream and all that. So, yeah, I think we're lucky if we get that much done, which is great for me now, because it means that I won't have to come up with the stat blocks and all that sort of stuff for the uncertainty monster, or monsters of uncertainty. Right, so what do I still need to come up with? I need to come up with a description for the Spectres Crossing Tavern, and by the way, crossing, I was thinking as in crossing from this world to the afterlife, like the Spectres Crossing, but you probably already got that. Yeah, so I need to come up with a Spectres Crossing Tavern. I'll need to come up with probably at least a shop. Like the Hiker's Release has just like a general store sort of thing, but maybe a more adventurer's shop or something that's more touristy. And maybe also a couple of NPCs that are just out on the street. And by that I mean literally just the name, what race they are, and maybe one word about to describe them. So basically, I need to come up with a few more bits of world building around here. And I don't need to. I'd probably be fine just coming up with this on the fly. But I've got the time now, and so I might as well come up with a little bit more. So I'll get to writing, and then I'll read to you what I've written in a moment. So after quite a while of thinking about this, I've decided to just put in a few names for NPCs that I could throw in if the party decide to meet someone on the street. Next, I've decided to call the boarding house here Hayshed Boarding House, which is the place that Sorum will insist that the party sleep at for the night in Vale Rift, because it's, I'll just read the description. Hayshed Boarding House is on an exposed road between fields and woods and has been suffering from monster attacks. So it's out a little bit outside of the town, and yeah, it's exposed. I think maybe they could even, as Sorum comes in, maybe they could even say something like, "Oh, Sorum, thanks for bringing more customers," that sort of thing. You're keeping us afloat, or something like that. Which could be a little clue as well that Sorum maybe isn't as good. Although, imagine if when they meet Sorum, they do insight checks or whatever it's called, and they roll natural 20s, and immediately know that something's off. Now that could easily happen. It may not. I hope that it doesn't, because then it's more exciting as they're figuring it out over the course of the story. But if it does, then I'll just have to improvise. Next thing I've come up with is kind of the touristy gift shop, souvenir, magic shops kind of thing, which I decided to call As Part of Vale Rift, because it's targeted at the people who don't live here or near here, who've come from a long way, and yeah. And then a gravity-ignorant pebble. So this is an item that has spent a significant amount of time in the anti-gravity field, and so it's retained some of that magic. So if you've got a pebble and you let go of it, it'll just float in midair. So you could do quite a bit with that. For example, you could just put it up when you rest in the night. You could put it up against the door, just have it float there. If someone opens the door in the night and sneaks around, then they probably won't notice the pebble, especially if you put it higher up. But in the morning, you'll see whether it's moved or not. And then a strange animal part. Animals here get strange. And so this could be something like an antler. It's kind of mushroom shapes or fern shapes growing out of it. even though it's made of bone and it's part of the antler. And then a vial of bath additive for 10 gold pieces. And this is just random herbs and plants and weeds that have been growing around areas that have these magical effects, that have been squished up and the juices put into this vial. And they're going to have, each one is going to have a random effect, a temporary effect. So if you put it in your bath and you bathe, it might change the color of your skin temporarily. And then I've put in an apple of crumbling. Imagine like a freeze-dried apple. So it's still the size and shape of an apple, but it's very light because pretty much all the moisture has left it. But it's retained its structure, and so it's very porous. And 5 silver pieces, and 1 gold piece if you want it coated in honey. I've not decided anything more about that. Maybe it's from a local tree where the apples just grow like this, or maybe the apples are being deliberately put into this magic field. Actually, that's a good idea. Maybe it could be like a preservative thing. Maybe we could have a field of preservation. Actually, no. Glade. A glade of preservation. And then a stone carving souvenir, which is kind of there to reinforce the idea that this is partially a gift shop. And this is made by Umgar Strawback, who is the guy who runs the Haystead boarding house, which again kind of as a clue that they haven't been doing well at all because nobody wants to sleep there because they keep getting attacked by these monsters of uncertainty in the night. And so they've kind of branched out a little bit, and being a dwarf, he is quite good with stoneworking. And so he makes these stone carving souvenirs for the gift shop, basically. Next and lastly, I've come up with a little bit about the Spectre's Crossing Tavern. So it's a Halloween-y, creepy scam tavern on a hill. It's a converted windmill. Bertie Wellwish, who's a male human who's the owner. And then a butler called Himlar, who is an elderly wood elf. Yeah, I don't think we won't go through most of this. If we're lucky, we'll go through a fraction of it. But it's fun to world build, and it's good to have these things here, especially since you can reference them through conversations and that sort of thing. Oh yeah, I did have the idea of temples being here because we've got a cleric, and so it might be good to have at least a few temples kind of as a bit of the background, so to give a little bit of opportunity for roleplay there, as well as I might need to come up with a layout or design a few design elements of the prison/dungeon where Mima's brother is being held, even though it doesn't look like they're going to break him out. But if they do, and I need to improvise this, then it's probably just a part of the House of Harmony anyway. So, with that, thank you all very much for watching, and good night, or good morning? Who knows? Bye-bye!